Is there any more beautiful vision of the way humanity and divinity work together than to see where we have been wrong and narrow, forgiven, and broadened into reconciling love? A lot has transpired since last week's reading from Genesis, in which we saw Joseph's brothers throw him in a pit before selling him to passing traders who took him as a slave to Egypt. You might have read the part we missed between last Sunday and this. Joseph's fate in Egypt was full of rising and falling. He was in favor and out of favor, and though he proved himself to be honorable, he was framed, imprisoned, forgotten even by those whom he had helped. Yet the story tells us the Lord was with Joseph and saw that whatever Joseph did would prosper. When we tell stories of our own in which we reflect on God's presence with us, so often it is with retrospect that we are willing or best able to recognize God's faithful abiding. We might wonder whether Joseph felt confident of divine direction in the moment, or if that's the narrator's prerogative to tell us that's how it was. At times in Joseph's story, others are aware that God was with him. God knew God was with him. But was Joseph in the know? Could he feel God's presence through his flourishing, but also in those unluckier times? Joseph, that dreamer, had been maligned by his brothers for the dreams he had as a child. But in Egypt, he earned the trust of Pharaoh after God helped him to interpret some of Pharaoh's troubling dreams to mean that they should prepare for a coming famine. So the story we get today picks up in the middle of that famine, when Joseph's brothers are in Egypt to ask for food. Joseph, those are the same brothers, the ones that threw him in the pit, right? This is not a different family. It's those brothers now coming hand in hand. Joseph had been placed in charge of managing Pharaoh's kingdom throughout these lean years, and he had been able to act with God's wisdom to advise and to advance the preparations for the shortages that are felt across the region. Now, he recognized his brothers immediately, but he did not reveal himself to them right away. For all they knew, they thought he was dead by now. But he compelled them to bring Benjamin, the youngest, whom they had left behind with their father, Jacob. So all the brothers are there, sharing this moment of supplication before this ruler in Egypt who might be able to help them. And we're not privy to his inner feelings, but one wonders how Joseph has thought of his brothers in the years since they last saw one another, since they sold him into slavery. What rising and falling might have occurred in his love and attachment toward them. And how had they rested with their guilt all these years? Their father still believed Joseph to be dead, as they had suggested to him. How had they remembered or sat with their own deceit and cruelty? Surely they had not imagined they would ever see him again, much less here in this position to bless or withhold blessing from them. There's no shortage of emotion in this scene. In fact, Joseph sends away all others so that he is alone with his brothers and weeps so loudly it can be heard and heard and heard. The brothers are dismayed, unable to speak at the revelation that this is their brother, Joseph, whom they betrayed. And yet, hear how ready Joseph is to free them from their guilt. Joseph interprets his own story as having been sent by God to be placed in a position to act with great love and wisdom. God sent me before you to preserve life, he says. He's interpreting his own position and moment and seeing within it God's wisdom. I can't help but think of my dad, who in the midst of his own long road of cancer treatment, found real joy in helping others adjust to a new diagnosis. He would not have said that the cancer was from God, but perhaps God had called him to a purpose and a direction within it. So in this emotional scene among these sons of Jacob, we have an image of what forgiveness looks like. Had Joseph already let go? Or does the sight of his brothers here in need move him such that his love and gladness toward them overcomes any hurt and anger? Now, many of us, most of us, I would imagine, have had the experience of wanting to forgive and yet being unable to find ourselves free of the anger, the hurt, the wonder that someone could have treated us that way. Or we may take refuge in telling our story, explaining our limitations and our frustrations with the catalog of all the ways that life has failed to cherish us. To forgive life for its changes and chances would be to look plainly at our own choices, seeing them just as they are, and ourselves as we are. I wonder if we can consider our own burdens of wounding, the things we have not been able to forgive. Can we imagine what it might feel like to discover that the painful thing, the source of so much anger and justification, is simply not there anymore? And in its place is something larger, fuller, that we realize we prefer to the nursing of that old sore place. Now, I'm drawn to imagining what this experience of unfolding forgiveness felt like to Joseph, so ready to free his brothers of shame and self-recrimination. They embrace, kissing and weeping together. How surprised the brothers must be to find this acceptance. Not only is Joseph alive, but he does not wish them ill. And the story doesn't give us a glimpse into their state of mind or heart, nor do we see a confession of their cruel treatment of Joseph all those years ago. All we know is that Joseph kisses them and weeps upon them, and then they talk with them. Maybe then they ask for forgiveness, own their meanness. But already Joseph has welcomed them back into his embrace, affirmed their belonging to one another that was interrupted so decidedly that day they threw him into the pit, and honestly, many days and years before that, when they let their resentment grow and overtake their love and duty toward their brother. This brother who kisses them and weeps and welcomes. You've heard that popular saying that forgiveness is letting go of our expectation that the past could be any different than it was. And in our Christian understanding, the power of forgiveness is even deeper than acceptance, as precious and peace-creating as that letting go can be. What God does within us and through us is to bring life out of that dead end of the past, creating something that we had not known how to imagine. The Franciscan priest Richard Rohr imagines God's invitation in this way. Give me your failure, God says, and I will make life out of it. Give me your broken, disfigured, rejected, betrayed lives, like the body you see hanging on the cross, and I will make life out of it. This is the divine pattern of promise and transformation which gives such hope to history, the central gospel message. We sometimes have trouble accepting God's acceptance of us, trusting that God wants to use this life of ours when there are other brighter choices to be had, that God forgives and frees us from the old story that we thought defined us. Recalling our very real struggles at times to forgive others, how much readier will we become to set those pains down when we allow that right now, maybe before we even recognize God and the ways God is at work, that God fully sees, fully loves, fully welcomes us. So there is no part of our story that's by the way or a waste or distraction. Nothing that gets cut for time or for being off theme or unflattering. God stands ready to welcome our whole selves, not merely to accept, but to transform and to celebrate our belonging to God and to one another.